you everybody for joining us for your lunch and our learning series. Hopefully you are getting some lunch while you're feeding your body, while we continue to feed your brain with information that's critical for us to be very active in many different legislative issues. My name is Penny Sharon. I'm the League of Women Voters of Arizona State President. On this call with me, monitoring the chat in the back end and helping is our advocacy chair, Gittel Sear. And so I'm grateful for her assistance on this. Before I turn it over to our amazing moderator, Alexis Lane, who leads the reproductive and women's rights issues for our league with others, I wanted to make sure that all of our guests who are participating and our panelists know the following. This week, the league turns 104 years, okay? And I'm sorry, 103 years. So I am so excited that we're all together here to celebrate really the amazing advocacy work that we've been doing for over 100 years on many, many issues. And our new challenge is certainly the whole problem of reproductive rights. Today, the League continues to be, throughout its 100+ years, a nonpartisan organization. What nonpartisan means is we are political. We are political about issues that we have studied and for which we have positions. However, our stand is not derived from one or another party. We don't support or oppose any candidates. We do not participate in any candidate-related work. In our nonpartisanship, what is very important to understand is the political landscape has changed. What used to be an area such as voting rights, where we had support from full bipartisan support, we certainly are seen being supported more by one side than the other on the issues. But that doesn't mean we automatically are aligned with that particular party. And it's important for everybody here to know that the League is nonpartisan. And we are nonpartisan because we believe the issues we care about are nonpartisan. They affect everybody, regardless of what party you're affiliated. So having said that, because I am eager to hear from Alexis and this amazing panel, I will turn it over to Alexis Lane, a member of our Metro Phoenix League and who has been helping lead this effort with some of the others. Alexis, thank you for your work. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Do we have a next slide, Penny?
It should have shown up on your screen.
Okay, I think we have two different slide decks, but this will be just perfect. So my name is Alexis Lane, and I am a member of the League of Women Voters, Metro Phoenix, and I am the membership chair. That's me. Yes, that helps me because the next slide is my
introduction. Got it.
All of our work for our bios for our speakers. So yes, so I am a member of the Metro Phoenix League. I'm the membership chair, but the reason I came to the League was because of my interest in women's reproductive rights and healthcare. So looking for organizations to get involved in, the League spoke to me, particularly for the message that Penny just shared on the issue being political but not partisan, because I think that most of us, I won't give you my own opinions, but we know that that's a human rights issue, that women's equality matters and should matter to everyone. So I say that because I know we have some veteran members on the call and some new members. So I wanted to give that perspective. As the chair for the Women's Rights and Reproductive Healthcare group, I am an enthusiast. I'm not an expert. So I rely on all of the wonderful information and expertise from the people on this panel. And we're so grateful that they took some time out of their very, very, very busy schedule, particularly this time of year, to join us and to share sort of an update and the lay of the land. Give us some context and help us better understand the confusing and breakneck pace of information that's happening, and important for all of us, how we can get involved, because I think that symbiosis matters so much, because as the League, we are a grassroots organization and we're all on this call because it's important to us to do what we can for this generation and for future generations on women's healthcare and equality. So if you're interested in joining this committee team, my email address is there at the bottom. It's also in every single Members Matter newsletter. So anyone who's interested in getting involved more now or after the call, always feel free to email. So for the next slide, I will go ahead and give you a brief overview of our illustrious panel. We have Jennifer Allen Aros, the Executive Director for the ACLU of Arizona, and she leads work to advance statewide advocacy agenda that drives immigrants' rights, LGBTQ+ equality, criminal justice reform, education equity in the state of Arizona. We're also so pleased to have joining us Kelley Dupps, the Senior Director, Public Policy and Government Relations at Planned Parenthood Advocates of Arizona, and their work advocates for no government intrusion into our personal healthcare decisions, for comprehensive, inclusive sex education, and accurate and affordable sexual and reproductive health care for all. And Jodi Liggett, who is a star in this field and has been for so long. Her bio would have been much longer than this, however, just couldn't fit it. So Jodi Liggett, among many other things, is at the helm of the Arizona Center for Women's Advancement, an organization that is a think tank for women's issues and advocacy, an organization that Jodi founded with her wealth of knowledge and experience working for both Republicans and Democrats in office in the public and private sector. So we're so lucky to have these three humans with us who have been working on this. As we know, everyone really got activated when Roe was overturned, but we know that those issues these folks were fighting in the trenches on other issues that limited women's reproductive rights and healthcare even before that. So now we're just in it more as the pendulum swings to even a farther extreme, which hopefully in the long run will wake more of us up and help get us back on track. So what I'd like to do is, Jodi, I'd like to have you sort of start and give us an overview of where we are. And I know that the three of you work well together on these issues. So I won't pretend that I know the best way for the conversation to advance. So we'll just make it an organic conversation, and we'll make sure to save time for Q&A. We have Gittel monitoring the chat with Penny. So once you're done, Jodi, we can pause for questions, or if we just want to keep the conversation going, we'll save them to the end. We'll just see how we flow.
That sounds great, Alexis, and thank you, and Penny and the League, just amazing participants, right? It's so important in this fight. I'm looking at Kelley and Jenny right now, like it can't always be Planned Parenthood and the ACLU, right? Moving these things over the finish line. I know they're key, but one of the things I realized when I worked at Planned Parenthood is how much help we need, right, in this area. There can't be too many people, and it actually helps policymakers understand if there are more of us talking about these things, like the League of Women Voters, who is, kind of a non-traditional messenger in this regard. So thank you, amazing. And I'll just throw out and talk a little bit about it. I think there are three main things happening, 3 or 4, right? So we had this election, and I think to the delight of most of us, Democrat or Republican on this call, we got a nice normal woman who actually wants to operate government elected to the governor's office, who does happen to be pro-choice and pro-reproductive justice. So we have a governor, we have a backstop. We also had a ballot initiative attempt that was, didn't have enough time, but that's out there. You had a governor who was elected partly on a promise to call a special session. And then you had court cases intersecting with all of this, making that special session necessary in an immediate sense. But you've got this ongoing conversation about a ballot initiative because we still have a conservative majority legislature, right? So although we have a backstop in the governor to stop things, very hard to do anything proactive, right? So all three of these things are working together. There's a ballot initiative that needs to happen, and a whole community of really different people who aren't used to working with each other at all have to get together and come to an agreement on how to do that and how to raise the $40 million it's going to cost to do that, to really settle this, at least some of it. Then you've got a hostile legislature this year that it started before, and we've seen this in some of the court cases that we can talk about in a second, this emerging notion of personhood as like the latest frontier, and how do you craft a backdoor ban, or how do you create the conditions for a backdoor ban on all abortions? You start embedding this notionhood that personhood starts when sperm hits egg. So if I'm a pregnant person, you know, the fetus inside me has every bit as many rights and privileges as I do. And I would argue that when you have to break ties in those situations, the pregnant person, you know, the person with the uterus is going to be the one who government does not pick in terms of upholding its rights, right? So that's a little complicated, but that's what we're seeing. We've got a number of bills moving this session. They sound great. They sound like things that support pregnant and parenting families. And actually, they are those things. If they weren't being used for nefarious purposes, we'd probably all be supporting them, right? Extending a child tax credit into the months of pregnancy instead of when the child is born. Extending domestic violence protections to fetuses, right? I mean, we've already seen in recent history how those kind of, you know, thinking about the unborn and focusing exclusively on that with blinders on leads to the criminalization of pregnancy. Then, you know, anything a pregnant woman does is subject to government scrutiny. And that's just not a situation we can be having in the United States or anywhere. But it's counter to our values here to be doing that. So we've got, you know, the usual bills moving through, not as many because our legislators have kind of latched onto this different tactic. We've got a ballot initiative with a big messy community trying to come together on that. So that's why you don't see people handing out language right now. Somebody has to agree to all of that, and there is not agreement in the community how we go forward on that. So I think I can be quiet for a minute. I know I would love hearing some of the specifics on a litigation update, because I think that informs both of these issues. And I can speak to NCJW, but I actually think the Planned Parenthood case, and the other thing I didn't mention, this, you know, territorial law that was in play for a while. So I could take questions, or we could toss it to the litigators.
I think you did a great job, Jodi. I think maybe to give people a little bit of time to digest all of that beautiful information, what I would suggest is maybe I could give it, like, play it back to you. And then if there are places that I've gotten wrong, just let me know. So the situation that we were in before is we had the bill that passed, Nancy Bartow's bill of the 15-week ban, and then Roe was overturned. So we were in this really messy spot of were abortions legal, were they not? So right now, where are we as far as whether abortions are legal in Arizona?
Right, they are legal. And I'm actually, Kelley, if you don't mind me popping this to you, right? The thing that makes it legal is the disposition of Planned Parenthood's case. So there you go.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. And here we go, friends.
Thanks, Jodi. Yeah, so there was a case in 1973 called Nelson versus Arizona, and that was decided right around the time of Roe. And you know, right around, you know, when Roe fell, we had a lot of Republicans that were deciding to govern by press release or tweet, you know, enacting or reenacting, or however they were going to, you know, put the 1864 ban on abortion into, you know, right back into law. And that ban essentially was against people who provided abortions and people who were seeking abortions. You know, and so we were party to that case in 1973. So when Attorney General Brnovich went to the court and said, hey, you know, we need to remove this, you know, injunction and let the 1864 ban into effect, you know, we were there to, you know, have great lawyers to say no, and to say, you know, how can you have a complete ban and purportedly have this 15-week ban that you just passed, not too long ago, right? Like it hadn't even been in effect very long. It went into effect in September. And so the court was really wrestling with these questions, right? Like what was in effect? Was the complete ban? Was the 15-week ban? They didn't have the 24-week ban anymore with Roe. And so what the court came down with was that the ban was going to be in effect, right? So we went from, Dobbs, overturning Roe, then we were in this ban, then the 1864 ban was right back into effect. And so we went back to court and said, this cannot stand, essentially. And so there was a stay put into place, right? So we could provide abortions statewide up to 15 weeks. And right now that's where we are, right? That's where we're allowed to do. And, I'd just like to also point out that 15 weeks can go by pretty quickly for folks when they realize they're pregnant, right? That could be week 6, 7, 8 of the pregnancy. Getting into a healthcare provider can take a couple weeks. And by the time, you get your test results, you are at 14 or 15 weeks. And so, we at Planned Parenthood don't believe any ban is acceptable. And so, given the clarity that the court provided that said that, the 15-week ban is in effect, right? Because you cannot have, both these things happening. That really gives us some clarity as to moving forward what we need to dismantle. But as Jodi said, the governor, decided that an immediate special session to repeal the 1864 ban was not necessary, but it is still on the books. And given all of this kind of back and forth with courts, it seems that, the really bad laws need to be repealed off the books so that they just can't come and suddenly, there's a different 1912 law that just says, I don't know, people can't have children, and suddenly, we're interning children, like it just really crazy stuff that you can't imagine in a modern day setting being a real live thing coming into effect. So I think that also, brings up a different question of, what happens to all those really bad laws that stay on the books.
That's helpful. So what we have now, the questions, whenever everyone registered, everyone was allowed to ask a question, and overwhelmingly that was the theme, is everyone gets very confused by whether we are in this 15-week ban or not. And is that are we in a stable place right now, or is there no such thing as stable?
Well, given that Chris Mays won the Attorney General position, basically the only person advocating for that ban is there's a doctor who was appointed as the guardian ad litem for the fetus. So, and he has asked for an extension to appeal the court's decision, and they will most likely grant that appeal. Whether what that appeal looks like, whether it gets actually granted by the court, the Arizona Supreme Court doesn't have to be transparent with their decisions of what cases they take. So there's still kind of this trepidation of like it's still kind of up in the air, and we're going forward and really trying to make sure we're providing care to as many folks as we can while we can, because we know that the rights of folks who are pregnant in this state are really kind of up for grabs in many ways.
Gotcha. Okay, so still important to stay vigilant as we have another lingering bogey out there. But as far as legislatively, the thing that we're tracking now is the 15-week is stable, but for a lawsuit. Is that where we are?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, that checks off a lot of questions from our registrant, so I appreciate that. Kelley, are there more things that you would like to talk about in that realm, or should we kick it over to Jenny for a chance to talk about involvement?
I'd like to kick it to Jenny, but I'd also like to say for the record that I'm not a lawyer. and I don't want to pretend to be. My good friend Jodi Liggett on the call is a lawyer, so I'm going to backstop to her for anything that I got wrong. But I'd also
Only
like to
for
kick it to
good.
Jenny.
Thank you so much. All right. All right, Jenny,
Well,
you're on. Oh, there you go.
that is my cue. Good afternoon, and I hope you all are enjoying a delicious lunch. And first of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters. I know we have been great partners with you. Appreciated working with the League over the years. Congratulations on 104 years. And congratulations on this week of activities and terrific work in getting your members consistently in front of legislators and policymakers, which is just such incredibly important work and very timely. You know, I think so. As I was thinking about kind of the the fact that you've got this lobbying week and all of these activities, and that it is that you're kicking off talking about reproductive rights, reproductive freedom, but then move on to talk about other issues throughout the week, and knowing that sort of breadth of interests of your members. I was sort of thinking about within the ACLU, we work on a whole lot of issues, some of which are priorities, some of which just kind of land on us because of being Arizona and all. We tend to have to think a lot then about the I don't know how to call it, kind of just like some of the strategies that underpin how we approach the issues. And so I was kind of thinking about that, given that this is, lobby week, 4 or 5 kind of areas sort of jumped out that I think have been helpful for us in kind of guiding how we are thinking about this work, that I just wanted to share. And my apologies if they are very mundane for you all. First is that I think particularly around this issue, around abortion, around reproductive freedom, it is so important to tell our stories. Knowing that some of your members are going to be at meeting with legislators. I was thinking about and heard a reference the other day to, you may remember there was a hearing that was held in Congress, so last year, the year before, where there were like 7 members of Congress who shared their abortion stories, their own and that of their partners, and the way that their lives have been impacted, and reinforced their commitment to continuing to lead in the fight to protect reproductive freedom and reproductive rights through Congress. Those stories, that was one of the first times members of Congress have talked about the fact that they had an abortion. They named it, put it on the table, talked about the context of the difficult decision that they had to make, and the consequences, just the challenges, but personifying sort of who it is that benefits, who it is that's impacted, and then making it really personal. So, I think it's incredibly important, is just the sheer fact of telling our stories and how these issues impact us, and particularly at a time where this issue has been driven by a lot of the kind of dog whistle politics that works to scapegoat and race bait folks of color and folks with a uterus. So personifying who it is that really does, which is, all of us need reproductive choice, reproductive freedom, right? So I feel like that was an important piece to think about this work as we move forward. The second was really around, and it's kind of a common adage, and it's particularly when we get folks in office that support an agenda, have made commitments to protect reproductive rights in our state, is to not conflate our access with influence. Now, I think more than ever, we have to keep the pressure, even on the Hobbs administration, on Attorney General Mays, because they have said that they will lead on these issues, they will veto bills, they will not prosecute, but we cannot and should not let that just sit on their word. Not that that means that I don't trust their word, but it means that we know that at this moment they are getting tons of push pushback, backlash from other forces. And so we have to be able to demonstrate the constant demand for them to fulfill those commitments. Right? So well, that, and we can't put all our eggs in their baskets, right? Because we know that compromise is the kind of rule of the game in politics. And so while they may make commitments and want to be operating at this level, the way the politics plays out, it will probably work its way down. So the degree to which we can keep putting the pressure up and up is the degree to which we can keep raising the bar higher and higher. And we can't rest on those laurels of their commitments, that there are lots of other targets of folks, of other decision makers who've got to continue to be in the mix. There's obviously legislators, the AG, the governor, school boards are actually in the mix of this debate, this conversation as well. State agencies have a role to play. Universities run health clinics, and the degree to which they make health care and reproductive health care accessible to students is also in play. So there's a number of actors that we have got to keep the pressure on. The third piece is a reminder that we are in the majority. And this is a difficult one to remember in that we are in Arizona. And we are often, when we stand up for the rights and dignity and the freedoms of our communities, we are often in the political minority. But right now, when we know, thanks to a terrific poll that was done by NARAL last year, 9 out of 10 Arizonans support reproductive freedom. So our legislators are out of touch with their constituents, right? We need, as we fight for the restoration of reproductive rights and the expansion of reproductive rights in healthcare in this state, we need to own that we are in the majority. People support this, and those who are opposed to it, they are disconnected from their constituents and they are in the minority. And it is their obligation to get up to speed with where we need them to be, where all of Arizonans need them to be, to step in and lead our state in the way that they're supposed to lead our state. This is also particularly important as we head into 2024, which I know we just started 2023, but Trump has announced his re-election campaign, which means, well, it means many things, but among those things, it means that we will, again, see feel that resurgence of the kind of his misogynist base. And so that is real. And so that we have to continue to demand and insist and assume that posture of being in the majority of the opinion, in that reproductive freedom and reproductive rights is what we Arizonans want and demand.
I think that's a really great point, Jenny. If I could interrupt you for one moment, just to remind everyone on the call that while we are in the political minority sometimes, the heart of the League of Women Voters is that voter education, registration, empowerment, and engagement, so that the ballot, the votes, the polls can reflect the will of the people. So that is sort of the baseline of it. And if we look, I'm looking at the participants on our call. While I represent League of Women Voters Metro Phoenix, there's League of Women Voters Tucson, Central Yavapai County, there's Prescott, Northern Arizona. The league has a mighty grassroots network. So just to shout out to those folks on the call that the infrastructure is there for us to do just what Jenny's explaining, because it seems really abstract and it seems pie in the sky. And without an organization like the league, you really can't do it because it takes so long to build that infrastructure. But with the grassroots network that we have, basically all we have to do is bring the information to the fired up people who are on this call. And I think that the 40 folks on the call represent a fraction of the league members and a fraction of the Arizonans who are ready, willing, and able to fight hard for what is so important to us in our hearts. So that infrastructure that Gatel, who is Miss Behind the Scenes, and Penny Sharon have set up on the AZ advocacy, the league, the Arizona level advocacy committee, is that. So all anyone has to do who is inspired by Jenny's words is reach out, and whether it's a little bit or a lot, or whether you're an expert or a beginner, there's always something to do. And as we know, those margins were thin the last election. So getting people to vote who are, who may otherwise feel that they're disenfranchised, to help reverse that makes all the difference in the world. So with your inspiring words and all of the information from Jodi and Kelley, I think that we have a winning combination. So sorry, a little pitch, because I can't help it. That's just who I am. That's why I'm here, is because I really get passionate about the grassroots piece of it and bringing people together. So everyone on the call, I wish that you weren't muted so that everyone could get in there right now, but there'll be time for that down the road for sure. Okay, Jenny, I'm so sorry. I want to give the floor back to you.
There was only the last thing that I was just going to mention is just that, I think, we talk about, abortion care, reproductive health as it's healthcare. And as far as kind of a demand, but it's also that, and we need healthcare, that we don't have healthcare for this, in this country and in this state. And so it's also just making sure that as we are fighting for the restoration and expansion of reproductive health care and abortion in this state and country, we are also connecting it and understanding how it sits in the context of both of reproductive justice, the economic issues, the social issues that are inextricably linked to a person who has to make the decision of if and when to have and grow a family, right? So it's linked to, the decision is linked to, living wage, to healthcare, to childcare, to education, to housing. All of those are the factors that lead into the decision of if and when to grow and have your family. And so while we fight on one single, it's important to have a clear demand, but then know what the next other demands are going to be, so that, the movement continues to grow and gain momentum, and we can make bigger and broader progress on the fundamental kind of rights and dignity that we need to be able to make sure that Arizona is a place that we can all happily call home.
That's awesome. I think that that's another wonderful way the league can get involved too, because we do have committees at the local level on education, on housing, on childcare. And the work we do is women's reproductive rights, justice, freedom, and health issues. So that's the committee that I represent today. And actually, I think that's a beautiful segue into another point that you were making earlier, Jodi, of other ways, other legislation that maybe feeds into this bigger picture of women's reproductive justice.
Exactly. I was unmuting myself just to make this yes to everything Jennifer Allen said, and feeds right into, you heard me talk about this, cute trick that folks are trying with personhood. That is a perfect opportunity. We can take that personhood concept and, turn it into a cudgel and beat on them with it just because we can, but also, to amplify all these other things. Yes. If you are worried, we don't want to create, a legal person out of a clump of cells, but taking the concern that normal people feel for pregnant and parenting folks and just struggling young families, yes, extend those tax credits back, right? Yes, do all these things forward. Oh, by the way, we have the lowest TANF grant, which is the major poverty program in the United States. We have the lowest TANF grant in the country, the shortest number of months for eligibility, and then you can never go back. We have the worst childcare reimbursement rates in the country. Like, there's a whole set of safety net issues and education issues and other social issues that all feed into this. And yeah, if we could use the next couple sessions and a new governor and a weird balance of power to start talking about what struggling families need, that will totally include abortion and reproductive rights and the bigger picture, right, of just some dignity for folks trying to make it. I think that is the fundamental thing underneath all of this is, you know, dignity as an individual person with control over my own body, but also dignity for communities and families that live in them.
That's great. That's really helpful. I want to move to a couple of other questions that we got from our participants, unless there are any other holes that we have to fill in.
I was only going to pivot to, you know, our opposition is really, you know, they're spiking the football after, you know, downing Roe and are going after other bodily autonomy issues, right? I mean, that's what voting rights really is. It's a bodily autonomy issue. If you are a transgender person and you are seeking healthcare, to Jennifer's point, yeah, try seeking healthcare anyway in this country. Then try to seek gender affirming care, then try to seek compassionate gender affirming care. Like it really just compounds these issues of, you know, our opposition is really attacking that idea of bodily autonomy. And so, you know, just trying to think about it that way, about what our opposition really is going for. I remember, you know, Jodi and I worked at Planned Parenthood. I still work at Planned Parenthood, but Jodi worked there and taught me everything I know. And this was at a time when they were really stripping away TANF, right? It went from whatever it was to 24 to 18 to 12 months. You know, they were really going after people, you know, and not either they didn't understand that, you know, having children was damn expensive, and that really it was an economic decision at many points in people's lives to be like, can I afford to do this? Right? And not really giving a crap that people were in those circumstances. So really just trying to paint that picture and draw the, you know, connect the dots for folks, because like Jodi said, they're very sneaky. Like, hey, you know, you can drive in the HOV lane if you're pregnant. Ha ha ha. You know, how do you prove that? You have to go to a healthcare clinic, right? Pee on a stick, prove it. Like you cannot get into healthcare places. Like it just really compounds that. And we're also talking about, you know, if I get pulled over by the police, there's a grand possibility that they're not going to kill me because I'm a white person. But if they're pulling over people of color, like let's be real, like Phoenix is one of the deadliest places to be if you are on the other side of a police officer. So really trying to connect the dots of what, you know, policing looks like, and they are policing abortion in this state.
Thank you for that, Kelley.
Can I just add one piece to that too, and that like it is the sort of the divide and conquer too that happens, that I always trying to be mindful of and paying attention to. So as we have a possibility with the new administration in the state to be able to restore or not not further criminalize, not enforce. Just got to keep scaling it back. Abortion care and abortion providers, and is there some possibility, some progress? What often happens is that there's this framing of a trade-off. And so, I did a lot of work many years ago around immigration and border issues. And, what we would always see in that when the time would come when there would be conversations about immigration reform, we would end up in this position where folks would be like, well, we'll give you a path to citizenship for the good migrants. And then we're going to build up the border and further militarize it. And then we're going to increase penalties for the, quote unquote, bad people. And so, I feel like at the legislature in particular, this happens. And particularly if we try to find, this is the tough part about sort of finding common ground across sides, is that in that finding the common ground, there's often communities that are going to fall out. And I think this year particularly, and we saw it last year too, but it's been up this year, is attacks on transgender youth and transgender folks in general. And I think just sort of making sure that we are solid and we are not allowing our communities and the state be sort of sliced off and folks being pushed out to the margins here and there in the name of progress around one particular issue, because it's just too narrow-sighted, and it'll come back and it will haunt us as a state and as we try to make further progress. So I think just kind of seeing how we are connected and ensuring that we are standing strong together as we move forward is important.
Okay, that united front for bodily autonomy and respect for our fellow humans. So talking to this group of this grassroots network across Arizona, a question that has come up often is a tough one, and it is, what can we do? What is the most effective action that citizens can do who aren't necessarily plugged in to the ebbs and flows and the not minutia because it's important, but the technical piece of it that every day we don't have the time to follow. So the league sends out action alerts so that everyone on this call can use the request to speak option to send messages when big bills are coming. That's what I know from the league perspective. Are there other things that we should be looking out for? Are there things on the horizon that would be important, or that you'd feel you'd like to share with the folks on this call about the most important things that we can do in 2023 as we approach another election year, in addition to registering and empowering voters?
I'm gonna jump in and say, share your story. Oftentimes we think that sometimes our story is inconsequential. It's not that dramatic, or it happened a long time ago, or many of the things that we, it's a silencing experience oftentimes to seek abortion care. And seek abortion care due to a whole host of things, to really just paint the picture that miscarriage, all the things that fall into, I don't want the abortion bucket, so to speak. I don't know how many times do you turn to your neighbor, your sister, your friend and say, how do you feel about abortion? Because I would have been restricted from having an abortion in my age, or whatever, however your experience fits into that, because oftentimes we don't share those stories and the power that has to really say, wow, you should talk to, we all kind of have those connections to our local, you should talk to Senator Tehran, who's my senator. You should talk to her about that and tell her about how insurance doesn't cover a lot of the miscarriage costs and how that impacts families who, wanted this child and really have some healthcare concerns now because of their inability to access care, or whatever it was that really ties that story together. It's not just a miscarriage story, or it's not just an abortion story, but how did that impact their family, their boyfriend, their spouse, their partner? Really, we've all benefited from abortion, whether that's freedom, whether that's, for most of my life, living under Roe and having, this veil of confidence that sure, folks with uteruses can access care. That happens all the time, right? And really coming to understand that, Roe was kind of a mirage really for many folks, and really what does, reproductive justice look like going forward, and how can we really, play a part in having our folks make those policies. Sorry for my dogs.
That's great. So sharing stories directly with legislators, because we've all got a couple, that's valuable. What about you, Jodi?
If I could jump on and hold that up and amplify it. Tell your story. A lot of us have stories, and you have to figure out where you are with that. And I would go even further, I think, on this topic, and it's a challenge, right? We've all been just through the holidays now recently, right? With our own friends and family who we love, and those dinner table conversations. I want us to, at least for a few topics, give up the notion of polite conversation. Now, that doesn't mean we get in, mean arguments with people that we know and we love, but silence is complicity. So if you're sitting there being quiet and letting things, pass that are wrong, or, your chiming in could make a teeny tiny difference, please be brave and take that step. I know it's one little thing at your Thanksgiving dinner, but it's like grains of sand, right? If we all start doing this a little more, and that doesn't even mean you have to change someone's mind about abortion care or pregnancy or when life begins or any of that, right? They can still feel the same way, but you can maybe help folks understand the disingenuousness behind some of this stuff, or even simply laws are blunt instruments. And this is one of the worst areas for law because it's so nuanced, it's so shot through with people's personal, religious, and moral and philosophical beliefs. And then the practice of medicine is really messy and complicated and very hard to regulate in the way that they're trying to regulate. And you wind up hurting people and families when you do that. I think people don't understand. I think everyday people don't understand the insidious nature, like the personhood thing that we were talking about. So just even putting out there that this isn't always about precious babies, but sometimes there are, sinister agendas being run. I think helping people understand that is huge. Just that.
Yeah. So dropping breadcrumbs or nuggets of it so that people understand how you feel, not necessarily in a combative way, but just to show there are people around that table who think differently. And that may open people's eyes, especially I like what you said about the law being a blunt instrument where everyone's situation is so unique. Everybody's body is so different, and showing respect for people's personal autonomy.
And if I may, just add to it, we all have three people for the most part, I believe, three people in the legislature who are our people, and they should know us all by name, because we should all build personal relationships, separate relationships with them, not just waiting for organizational action alerts, but reaching out to them on a consistent, regular basis and making sure that they know the issues that are important to you, get to know them, and don't wait to do it in a more kind of standardized click and send way. Do it all the time. And then the second thing I want to push is that I am a huge believer, and this is just a tactic. House parties. House parties are the best organizing tactic ever. It works for Tupperware and it works for social justice. So, inviting over your friends, family, neighbors that are not already involved, but who know you and care about you and think that you'd make good decisions, invite those folks over, talk to them a little bit about the issues, ask them how they think about the issues, and then ask them to get involved, and then plug them into the League of Women Voters, and that, and then ask who else wants to host such a thing. And they just grow and they grow and they grow. And they happen in the safety and comfort of our homes with people that they're led by people that they know and trust. It is a profoundly powerful organizing tactic. So I highly recommend it as a way to just keep getting more and more people engaged and following all of your leadership and building your leadership and networks.
I think that's a really important point to stress the humanity of it, is building a relationship with your legislator. At first, when you say those words, it sounds foreign, sounds alien, like what? They're legislators, but they're people and we're constituents. And I think at the state level, particularly, there isn't that much space between the constituents and the legislators, and they want to hear from us. They want to know what issues are most important. So reaching out on a consistent basis with, as Kelley mentioned, personal stories, because I think it would be hard for them to understand the lives of their constituents just based on statistics. But when you say that you've got a medical bill and this is how it all shook out, and hearing people testify, being down at the Capitol or the few times that I've been down there, listening to a personal story, and then a bill is named in their honor because that's what they needed. They needed to hear how particular it was. Now, obviously, this issue it's a big one. So it can't always be that easy, but I am an eternal optimist. So let's see if there are any others. I think that we have covered most of the questions that were submitted. I wonder if Penny is standing in the background ready for any other questions that we may have missed. There she is. Penny,
My
we have in our
apologies.
last few minutes, I wanted to make sure that we circled back with you to make sure if there were any other pieces that we missed or any other important topics that our members may want to hear while we have this panel here. I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Alexis, you know, I'm not an expert on this. I'm one of your on the ground people concerned. I just want to say that the questions might be going to you and Gittal too. So you might want to check, okay, to make sure you didn't get any. There is a comment, I don't know if you all saw this, Kelley and Jennifer, about miscarriage is not an abortion. Can you speak a little to that? Because that is, you know, criminalize something that nature has not, you know, it's, you know, it's not based on a decision an individual makes, and probably has caused so much distress to the individual who has experienced this. Can you talk a little bit about that? And one more thing I wanted to ask you as you talk about that is, you know, miscarriage affects anybody regardless of your political affiliation or your religious beliefs. And, you know, it's, who knows what the reasons are. I'll shut up. And then Alexis, I don't know if you have something more on the chat. And whenever you're ready, I will say a few closing words if needed, though you can do it as easily.
No, that's perfect. I think that's right. I think maybe that's speaking to your earlier statement, Kelley, about how healthcare restrictions can affect people and the healthcare they're having, even after an abortion. So an unintended consequence, perhaps?
Sure. Actually, medically, a miscarriage is called a spontaneous abortion versus other, I guess, types of abortion. I guess you could call it elective, but in the law, they just say abortion. You know, and so just acknowledging that the way that medical things are billed, the codes that they use are called, that's what they call it. And so really being able to understand that, you know, what does a miscarriage look like versus a self-managed abortion versus medication abortion. You know, I'm not a doctor, and doctors can't tell you the difference, right? Like there is no difference. So you can easily criminalize something that looks like perhaps a self-managed abortion, but it's really a spontaneous abortion, right? Because you can't, there's no test, there's no chemical, there's like nothing that says yes, 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 no, no, no. And so it's really like, so who gets criminalized when it's this messy, right? It's queer folks, it's poor folks, it's people of color. And so it's really kind of like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not a law, really, you know. So it's really just kind of, you know, that's how it can be used to really kind of skew the results, right, of what they're trying to do.
Right. There's so many nuances. I do remember anecdotes about that, like people coming into an emergency room after a miscarriage, and they're automatically on trial for whether it was an abortion, how far along were they, et cetera. So that criminalization of it changes the whole, someone who's in a really precarious medical state, the whole characterizes it in a new light that's really traumatizing.
Yeah, and pregnancy is really precarious. Like it is a medical condition. So really understanding that, you know, it's not just, you know, there's what, 20% of pregnancies end in spontaneous or end in miscarriage. And so it is a common occurrence that happens to folks that can be pregnant or that are pregnant. And so I think it's, you know, and most of the time folks don't talk about it, right?
Sure,
You
it
know,
goes back to Jodi's point of the law being a really blunt instrument.
Right, or even, you know, bereavement policies don't cover miscarriage oftentimes. So really looking at your like paid family leave? Like, does it cover miscarriage? Like those types of policies that really, really incorporate the humanity of what these laws are trying to do, without, like Jodi said, having it really be the blunt instrument that it often tends to be.
I have a question, Alexis. Kelley sort of triggered with a word he used, humanity. I'm just wondering if there are some thoughtful talking points that move less into the it's a choice issue to the humanity issue of these laws, in the sense that, yes, you know, body choice and freedom to choose is our, you know, where we stand as the league. But are there ways in which we can start talking much more strongly about the toll, the human toll, if you will, on these laws? You know,
Sure.
it's not just about, you know, I'm you
Right,
can
I know
tell
what
by
you're
that
saying.
question, I'm not the expert, you know.
I think that it speaks to the idea of reproductive justice and how each of us as humans, we have a whole spectrum of issues that we work towards. It's not just about whether you want to have a baby or not. It's, do you have access to all of the things that make it possible for us to have fulfilling lives, economic opportunities? Are there marginalized folks who don't have the same access to the human needs, the humanity piece of it that we know is so important? Are there other pieces of that, Jodi, that you'd like to talk about? I think maybe it just encompasses that idea of that it's a multifaceted issue: pregnancy, abortion, the decision of when and if to become a
Right.
parent.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just the general way we're talking about awareness, and then specifically, I think it's important for people to realize, you know, you can view this kind of from arm's length and think that has nothing to do with you, right? Because maybe you don't believe in abortion, or you just think you're never going to have one, but then you have a complicated miscarriage and you need a procedure, and it's something that is regulated by this legislature because it's an abortion, even though you're pro-life and, you know, that's not your story. This is your situation, and now you are having the legislature micromanage your body and your well-being. So I think that's part of what we're talking about here too. Yes, it sweeps in all these concepts, and reproductive health care is more than just ending a pregnancy, right? It's all these other things, and people need to understand that these laws are talking about them too. If you have
Adding
a uterus,
Sure.
these laws are talking about you.
Adding layers between a doctor and a patient, and the layers are by way of the state capitol. So who wants to take that route? And if it could happen here, who knows? It could happen elsewhere where the legislators are more involved in doctor-patient decisions.
Exactly.
So Alexis, it's 1:01. Are you ready to wrap it up and do a quick overview?
Yes. Well, thank you all so much for your time, panelists. We appreciate your expertise, and obviously with so much going on, we value your time, and we know that it is no small feat to be here with us today for this very special hour. So we will we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much to all of the league members and potential members who are on the call today. I hope you found all the information helpful. We are recording the session, so we will be able to share that with folks if anyone has missed it. And stay tuned for the updates, how we can get involved on the advocacy front, either bite-sized pieces or big ones, getting your car, driving down to deliver testimony and help us on the ground, or the request to speak. Or I love what you said, Jennifer, about house parties, the humanity again of people talking to people and using common sense to address an issue that is really complicated, but maybe it doesn't have to be as complicated as we're making it as it gets politicized. So with that, I am done. Penny, if you have anything else you'd like to
No,
say.
thank you, Alexis. She's an amazing new, she's joined us for a year and a half and has brought such leadership to this discussion, to our league. We are very fortunate for this amazing new generation of our league members, and I'm so grateful for all the work you're doing. Very grateful to Jodi, who is, by the way, we didn't mention, our professional lobbyist, who's probably on her way to fight the dragons at the Capitol this afternoon, okay? And thank you, Kelley and Jennifer, for giving your time. But Alexis, thank you to you, okay?
It's a pleasure.
Bye,
It's an
everybody.
honor. Thank you.